Here to cover all things crime, history, and politics, we are at the desk. I'm your host, Lauren Perry, and in today's episode, we will talk about a major political development involving a familiar face, Western democracies recognizing the Palestinian state, and an investigation of the music artist David Burke. Now, come take a seat with us at the desk. Welcome back to ATD. First, it's time to send it over to the politics panel to discuss a major development involving a familiar face and a decision that left many stunned. Over to you, Ryan.
Well, thank you, Lauren. Tonight, yet another government shutdown is looming. Democratic lawmakers line up behind Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, who are demanding an audience with the president, as a deal must be made before October 1st to keep government services open. But first, following the death of Charlie Kirk, Jimmy Kimmel joins many Americans who have been fired or resigned due to comments regarding the 31-year-old's assassination in Utah 2 weeks ago. So, Sam, we're going to start off with you. Welcome to episode number 2 of the season, you two, and we're back here again. I'm very happy to be hosting. Sam, please tell me, what do you think about this current situation? Obviously, he's back on air tonight in a few hours at the time of taping this. If you're watching live, I suggest you go check it out after. He's back, but 22% of Americans will not be able to watch it.
Yeah, it's a really tricky situation, Ryan. First, Republicans have come out and said, including Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul, he said that the FCC chair, Brendan Carr's comments were absolutely inappropriate. And that's true. The FCC should have no say on, technically what's happening on the air. With that being said, he also made the comment that you have the right to say what you want in freedom of speech, but you do not have the right to employment. And that is a very interesting thing that we're seeing not only in the Jimmy Kimmel situation, but all over. People are saying what they want, and they're saying, is it a free speech issue? Is it an employment issue? I'm not sure.
Well, the difference with the Kimmel situation is it's not just a free speech thing. It's that there was an obvious coercion attempt by Donald Trump and the United States government, the FCC, to get them to cancel his show. They brought him back. They brought him back this morning, but Nexstar and Sinclair Media are still refusing to show him across most of, you said 20%?
22%.
22% of American households, which is interesting because Nexstar is looking for a merger with the other broadcasting group, Tegna, and if it's a $6 billion merger, and if completed, it would give them control over about 80% of the households in the United States, and they're representing groups, whether they be Fox, ABC, or wherever. They need this approval for this merger by the FCC. So if you really want to read between the lines, you look at this kind of exchange that seemed to happen, and you just start to question a couple things about it.
Yeah, I think putting ethics aside, which we definitely will get into, as well as the First Amendment, I think that this was a bad business decision. And I think ultimately this was a business decision, which led to a $5 billion loss for Walt Disney. I think that this will have major repercussions, not only for the companies, but just as well as the administration, because this obviously has ties to the administration. And yeah, this did more damage than good, definitely.
Now, would I call this an attack on free speech per se? No, but I would say it is very hypocritical of the right, because the right forever has been saying cancel culture is bad. It's mainly been the left doing it to the right, but now it's the right trying to kind of get revenge for what happened back in 2020 and before that. So I think that it's definitely not a good look for the Trump administration. And I think that Disney will take some hits business-wise, because I think the majority of Americans don't think Jimmy Kimmel should have been canceled, even if they don't agree with what he said.
But that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they don't really agree with this, and it doesn't really matter if they don't find Jimmy Kimmel funny. What makes it a free speech issue is not just that he said something and got fired, which is part of what happened, is that there was an obvious exchange.
Never got fired.
He didn't get fired. You're right. His show was put on indefinite suspension, but there was an obvious exchange between him and between the ABC and the Trump administration, where they bent the knee to Trump's request or the FCC's request. It's just really interesting. You said I forget which politician you said, Republican politician, Rand Paul, right? Denounced it. Ted Cruz denounced it too, saying that David Carr on Twitter sounded like a mafioso, like a mob boss.
Yeah, he said it was something out of Goodfellas. And I agree with Ted Cruz on this matter because, yeah, Trump has no business going after a company like that. I mean, if he wants to disagree and say that the comments weren't sensitive, they weren't true, that's fair enough. But yeah, to pressure a company to suspend a show as a president, I think it's petty.
Government, freedom of speech infringement, maybe. Definitely government oversight and too much with the government. There's a recent case, National Rifle Association of America versus Volo, and they ruled 9-0 with Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, saying government officials cannot coerce private parties in order to punish or suppress views that the government deems unfavorable. Meaning to this case that the FCC should have no say on what a outside private business is doing. And I think that is the biggest thing here. If they can go up to a big major company, as in Walt Disney, as in the ABC network, one of the big networks in this country, and do this to a prominent figure, what else can they do going down the line?
It's not just them. He's threatened on his Truth Social and in reports that threatening to take away different broadcasters' licenses,
right?
Which is just a clear that if that's not a First Amendment violation, I'm not sure what is.
And you got to take a look at the list of people who have been on Jimmy Kimmel's show. I mean, he said Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton. He said Arnold Schwarzenegger, former California governor. He said a lot of prominent people on television. Trump sees this guy as a threat. I mean, he hasn't directly said that out loud, but it's very understandably inferred that he might see this guy as a threat to his popularity, just like we saw with South Park, just like we saw with a lot of other shows and a lot of other individuals at universities who have talked bad about him. The Trump administration could very much see this as a threat to his popularity, and that's something that we know Trump really appreciates, is his popularity ratings being up. Talks all the time about how he's got this approval rating of 50-60%, doesn't really cite it. A lot of guys are coming out saying, I think most recently it was 38-39%, a Republican-leaning poll put him at.
Yeah, I would like to talk about the comment itself, because although there was some backlash made, the comment itself wasn't necessarily about Charlie Kirk. It was more an attack on Trump's reaction to the death of Charlie Kirk. And I think that highlights really the sensitivity that this administration has to any sort of criticism on Trump, which I think is definitely the most alarming part of this whole situation.
I think of politics as this. It goes back and forth, right? Sometimes Republicans have the majority, maybe they're the president, maybe the Democrats the president. That changes quite frequently. But the precedents that you set seems to follow. So and this is what Ted Cruz said, what the Republicans do now is setting up for eventually, if the Democratic Party can ever get their stuff together, when they become powerful again, they can do the same exact thing with the weaker Republican Party.
Now, here's what I find funny, too, is one of the two comments that Kimmel made that obviously had people a little frustrated weren't really necessarily a direct attack at Charlie Kirk as an individual, but
Not
Trump's reaction. One of them being, yes, he's at the fourth stage of grief, that being Trump construction, because he mentioned in a press conference, when asked about Charlie Kirk quickly after, how was the ballroom doing? He goes, well, as you can see behind us, they're working on the ballroom. He talked about the ballroom when he was directly asked about Charlie Kirk. That's what he went towards. Another comment he made, that being Kimmel on his show, we hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA game, desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them, and doing everything that they can to score political points from it. Now, that's definitely a little bit more sensitive from the first one, but those are the two quotes that got him essentially kicked off the air by Nexstar, by Disney, whoever you want to claim was the reason why he got kicked off the air. But in my opinion, I don't think that's really enough to be considered targeting and a violation of, or too much free speech.
And I mean, this all just falls under the Trump administration's kind of cahoots that they have with multiple corporations. Whether it's buying 10% of Intel, they're trying to buy 10% of Lithium America right now. It's really interesting to see how corporations and the government are working together right now. And I saw this quote by Mussolini the other day that really was interesting to me. He said that fascism should be more appropriately called corporatism because it is a merger of the state and corporate power. Is this not what it looks like right here?
On paper, yes. But it really depends how far Trump is willing to take it. And I don't know if he's willing to go as far as, say, Mussolini, for example. But I do think that he definitely has.
Yeah.
Yes, I definitely think that he has an ego on him, and that what he's been doing recently is not going to help his approval ratings. That being said, Democrats aren't exactly popular either. But it just goes to show how bad politics are right now in general in the United States.
Yeah, and I will say, Sam, you did mention like the Republican Party is setting precedent with their reaction to this. I think it's important to note that a lot of politicians associated with Trump or political commentators or Trump himself that are aligned with the Trump administration have used comedy in situations that could be deemed offensive. Most recently, at a rally in October 2024, comedian Tony Hinchcliffe made racist jokes about Puerto Ricans, referring to the country as an island of garbage. Although Trump did kind of remove
moved
himself,
away. He moved away from
him. I think that itself is something that has sparked a lot of reaction, and I don't think it's nearly as bad to say it wasn't nearly comparable to what Jimmy Kimmel said. And again, to reemphasize, Jimmy Kimmel did not make any comments necessarily about Charlie Kirk.
And to add on to what you said, actually, the Trump administration was talking about a couple weeks ago. I don't have the current status on it, but they were proposing to create a reality TV show to get people to become citizens. I don't know if anyone remembers that one.
Yes.
So they were getting all strict on citizenship, and then they were saying, we're going to do a reality TV show, just like Survivor, where you have to earn your citizenship basically through surviving an entertainment-based game. So, does anyone have any comments on that? Like
that
the
connections?
feels
pretty dystopian.
Yeah.
It's the folly of
sci-fi
populism,
novel.
we'll say. He's trying to do something that seems cool and funny to appeal to the general public, even though it's quite frankly kind of stupid.
Yeah, well, we're being moved on. I'd love to talk about it more,
Yes.
but we're going to talk about this government shutdown that's exactly 1 week away. So 1 week from today, if the government doesn't come together to meet with a resolution, that being the House and the Senate together, mind you, the House did pass something, but the Senate did not approve it, the government will shut down in a week. And that does not mean that the government's just going to totally stop operating at the federal level, but it means that over 800,000 employees are going to be without pay, and many will be told not to come to work because the government's not going to be able to find the money when they come back. They can find a temporary resolution. They're not making much progress. The House and the Senate are both in recess for the end of the week. Anyone have anything to add?
I think the first important thing to note was that both the minority leader in the House,
Jeffries?
Keith Jeffries,
yes.
and Chuck Schumer both scheduled a meeting with Donald Trump.
Mhm.
And today he put out that he canceled it because he thinks that nothing's going to occur, nothing's going
Trump
to happen.
canceled it.
Yes,
Yeah.
Trump
did
canceled it with Jeffries saying that he's a chicken and he runs from
Taco.
right. He
That's
runs from these kind of issues. Now, the one thing I will say with the Democratic Party is this: they don't have anything going for them.
Mm-hmm.
Their former presidential candidate Kamala Harris just came out with a book called 107 Days, which basically bashed most of the party. They don't have the majority in the House, they don't have the majority in the Senate, and they don't have the presidency. There is no real area of power that they can get to. And if they have a power holdout, I feel like the Republicans are just going to keep pushing this narrative about the left, which might dig a hole deeper for the Democrats.
It just feels like a trap because the Senate, they need 60 votes, right, to pass this bill. They need Democrats' help.
To get out of the filibuster.
To get
yes.
out of the filibuster, yes. Back in, I think it was February or March, there was the same thing. Like there was questions over a government shutdown and whether Schumer and all of them would support it. And the House actually supported the government shutdown. Once it got to the Senate, Schumer and Gillibrand just totally shut it down, blew everything up. At the moment, I was in favor of a shutdown, but in retrospect, looking back on it, it feels like a trap. It'll be very easy if they continue through this shutdown, if they choose to do so, for the Republican Party, given that they have all the power right now, to spin it as the Democrats have shut down the government and are putting these 800,000 federal workers at risk. It just looks like it'll end up being a PR disaster for Democrats, which is a shame because all they really want is some leeway over healthcare.
And here's another
It's
thing
all
that I
about
want to
healthcare.
add, but before we get more into the opinion, is procedural requirements. During the reorganization of government funding in the 20th century, I believe it was the 1970s, there was a requirement that prior to a shutdown, actually, I believe it's every 2 years at the very least, if there's no threat of a shutdown, each government agency needs to prepare for how they're going to react to a government shutdown. Who's going to work? Who's going to not work? The Biden administration, believe it or not, I know transparency is not a thing of theirs, was very transparent about that. They updated it frequently. They had almost zero problems. The Trump administration somehow deleted that from the website.
Well, the partial shutdown between 2018 and 2019 delayed approximately $18 billion in federal discretionary spending for compensation and purchase of goods and services. So economically, it doesn't seem like this is going to be a decision that's going to help the American people, which that is what Trump claims is his goal. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't think this will be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, when two parties disagree and they can't come to agreement on a simple healthcare extension, it's never going to be good for any American citizen. That being said, I mean, I'm not sure how long the Democrats have been pushing this healthcare extension. I just heard about it recently. But I mean, depending on my judgment would come based on how long they've been pushing it. So
Since
in that
the Big
case,
Beautiful Bill.
Has a big beautiful bill.
Because they, you know,
Yeah,
I forget how many million Americans lost healthcare or going to lose healthcare in the next year or so as a result of the Big Beautiful Bill.
It'll be a slow process, yes.
A lot of it it's a slow process on purpose. They made it that way on purpose to get as close to midterms as possible when people start losing and they can shift blame. It's just like I said before, if they choose to shut down, which I just can't say I support right now, the longer it goes on, the worse it looks for Democrats. And historically, shutdowns do not go in favor of the party that is trying, not initiate, but trying to get concessions. They rarely get their concessions, and it just doesn't, it's just bad press. It's bad PR, looks bad for the Democrats, and it'll look worse than they already do.
Yeah, I think it's 100% bad press, like I mentioned earlier. I also would like to mention that there's been how many government shutdowns or almost government shutdowns
22.
in the past year, 2 years,
in the
3
past
years, 4
year.
years.
Oh.
I mean, I feel like every couple months we're moving to this government shutdown, and then in the 11th hour, there's always some type of agreement. This time does feel different, though, because this is the one way the Democrats can get at Trump, which would be a government shutdown. Like we're saying, though, there can be a weaponization on the other side. And also, like you mentioned, last time, Chuck Schumer, he did fold at the end of
At the very last minute.
At the very last minute,
In the
which
Senate.
hurt them. This time, he promises not to do that. With that being said, when push comes to shove, and like the last shutdown was the long one was 35 days. I don't know if this government and our country can handle that.
And I don't know, do they have like you said, Ryan, does the Trump administration have a plan in the case of a shutdown?
Well, they know that the executive branch gets more power when the government is shut down.
Exactly.
I
And
think they're
that's
excited.
another problem.
I think it's an excitement because why wouldn't it be? You get to blame the Democrats that you can just say they don't want to work. They don't want to come to an agreement. Their ideas are lunatic, is just ludicrous. Well, like this is great for the Trump administration. Why would they have a plan?
Thanks for the point.
I mean,
Anything to add?
I mean, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think ultimately this is definitely a guise to make the Democratic Party look bad. And I mean, it might work, it might not. This open display of bickering between Democrats and Republicans is definitely setting a precedent that this is not going to come to an easy solution. Yeah. Your guys'
Well, Donald Trump is very good at dirty politics. We know this. He loves to humiliate Democrats as opposed to sometimes doing the right thing. We just know this from the last 10 years. So I think he will try to use this as a way to get at Democrats and a way to strengthen his own executive branch because he wants more power. He always does.
He'll take it whenever he can.
It's hard to see, and it's hard to tell what Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are actually going to fight back some, because if they don't, then midterms for Democrats are going to be very, very rough.
And exactly that. Like the Democrats, I don't know what they gain from a government shutdown at this point. They can try to point the finger saying this is the Republicans and Trump's fault. But at the end of the day, they don't have the majority in anything. Midterms are coming up and they're losing. Trump's favorability in crime, the economy, the border is above what he was the last time he was president. Most of those categories by plus 10%. So when you look at those kind of areas, you go, what are the Democrats gaining, and do they just fold because there's no real life in this?
Well, immigration is probably the one area where Donald Trump gets most support from the American public. I'll say that the most of the American public, for better or for worse, my opinion, for worse, supports the current administration's immigration policies and ICE raids and all of that stuff. So really, they're not going to lose there. I just think when it comes down to it, I can't imagine Chuck Schumer looking at the possible collapse that could happen for their party as a result of a shutdown and think, yeah, let's do this. I think he did. I think looking back, he made the right decision last time, and I think he's going to make that same decision again.
Definitely.
All right. Well, does anyone know when the last government shutdown was?
Last time he was president, yeah.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yep.
2019,
It was 2019. It was 35 days. It was over border wall funding. Anyway,
Classic.
yeah, well, all right. More from PSN TV's Political Roundtable next week on At the Desk. Lauren.
Thanks, Ryan. Let's head over to Ginevra to tell us more about Western democracies recognizing the Palestinian state.
Thank you, Lauren. On September 21st, four Western democracies, Britain, Canada, Australia, and Portugal, officially recognized the state of Palestine. On September 22nd, France followed suit and formally recognized Palestine. On that same day, Belgium, Luxembourg, Malta, Andorra, and Monaco also announced recognition. These recognitions mark a major shift in foreign policy for certain countries that had already reserved recognition. The recognitions are being seen as a two-state solution, which foresees the sovereign Palestinian state existing peacefully alongside Israel. Humanitarian concerns have become more central in these decisions. Leaders are under domestic and international pressure. Israel has condemned these recognitions. The Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called them a reward for terrorism and rejected the idea of a Palestinian state under current terms. The United States has also opposed recognition. Palestinian leadership welcomed the recognition as necessary. There has been discussion between experts and media circles on what constitutes statehood. The classical criteria often cited are a permanent population, defined territory, and a government Palestine. Palestine doesn't meet all the criteria. Most argue that full independence is lacking. Before the burst of recognition, over 140 UN member states had already recognized Palestine. With the new additions, that total is now 153 out of 193 of UN member states. Countries like France have said that this move reflects serious diplomatic change and not just symbolism. France also put forward ideas like instituting a renewed Palestinian Authority and possibly a UN-mandated stabilization force in Gaza. Belgium's prime minister said recognition would take effect once hostages are freed and Hamas is removed from power. Even with recognition by many states, U.S. and Israel opposition remains strong. This will matter a lot in diplomatic arenas and how peace negotiations might restart. Many states have demanded that Hamas be disarmed or removed from governance in Gaza, and others insist the recognized Palestinian state must be democratic, unified, and have legitimate representation. For many people in Gaza and the West Bank, daily life, security, movement, and humanitarian access will depend on what Israel does, what Palestinian authorities can do, and what the international community will support. Back to you, Lauren.
Thanks, Ginevra. It's time to send it over to the crime panel to discuss the investigation of the music artist David Burke. Over to you, Eva.
Thanks, Lauren. A rising music artist is now the center of a disturbing investigation. David Anthony Burke, better known by his stage name spelled D4VD, is under investigation after the body of a 15-year-old girl, Celeste Rivas, was found in his impounded Tesla on September 8th. The car was towed there after being abandoned in the Hollywood Hills. Authorities were alerted days later when a foul odor was reported coming from the vehicle at the impound lot. Burke rose to fame through viral TikTok hits and launched a national tour earlier this year. As of now, no charges have been filed, and police are continuing to investigate the circumstances surrounding the teen's death and Burke's possible involvement. Today, we are going to dive deeper into the situation and discuss the many unanswered questions surrounding this case. Alrighty, Sophia, I'm going to toss it over to you to kind of give us a timeline breakdown of this situation.
Yeah, definitely. So David started his career as a streamer on YouTube while playing Fortnite. And in November 2021, he started creating his own music, and he actually went viral on TikTok. And he signed a record deal with the label Darkroom and Interscope Records in September of 2022. Sometime between 2022 and 2024, he started dating 13-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. On April 5th, 2024, Celeste is reported missing. Flash forward a year later, David is still making music. He came out with his debut album titled Withered in April 2025, and he goes on tour. On September 8th, 2025, someone reported a foul smell coming from a Tesla in a Hollywood tow lot. The Los Angeles Police Department responded to the call, and they found human remains wrapped in a bag in the front trunk of the Tesla. The car was registered in Hempstead, Texas to David, and apparently the car was abandoned in the Hollywood Hills a few days ago and then was taken to the impound lot
judging by the state of the body, she had been dead for an extended period of time. So after the body was identified as Celeste's, David canceled his September 17th show in Seattle, and his representatives say that he's been cooperating with authorities. They searched his home and recovered several items of evidence, including his computer. However, we have no further information on the rest of the evidence, and no charges have been brought against David. Police say that this is an ongoing investigation. So definitely a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah, and we'll get all into that a little later. But Sam, I know you want to talk about the song.
Yeah, so I don't think we've ever done an ongoing investigation case on this panel. I think that's really interesting.
No, actually,
I don't.
I think you're right. Yeah.
So there are a lot of suspicious things. Obviously, he is not found guilty yet. It's an ongoing investigation, so we can't use those words, and we don't even know if he's guilty. But there are some interesting kind of connections to Celeste and David. David wrote a song titled Romantic Homicide. His music video was released on Celeste's birthday. Now, that could be just coincidence, but I don't know. A lyric in that song, "In the back of my mind, I killed you and I didn't even regret it." That is a lyric in his song. Now, songwriters, they write some, freaky songs, but the music video is also a glorified romance and a glorified death. I don't know, with a body found in his car, I don't know. Also in 2023, there was a song called Celeste, and it's talking about a girl he is in love with. And I also think this is interesting. They had matching tattoos on their finger. Now, we know that they were connected. They were friends. I mean, she was 13, he was 18 when they were together on Discord, which is where a lot of the streams were, which is not normal, but we know they did know each other. But I think the song Romantic Homicide, the song Celeste, I don't know, could be a connection.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Definitely.
So, Kara, up to you.
Kind of like branching off of what you said, a lot of this has really seemed to arise from social media. And obviously, I feel like with more of the modern cases we discussed, that's, kind of the case. There's a lot of things on Twitter and TikTok and Instagram. I mean, literally the whole reason why he got famous was because of his song that he put on TikTok. It skyrocketed him to fame. We mentioned this earlier, but he even, was rising to the point of stardom. He actually opened for SZA in February of 2023. And I mean, it's SZA. I mean, she was, we all know SZA, she just at the Super Bowl with Kendrick Lamar. I mean, you have to be fairly talented, and I would say pretty, famous and up and coming to get to work with someone like that. But I just kind of wanted to point out a lot of the things involving, the social media here. And, as you said, this is an ongoing investigation. And unfortunately, we have little to no evidence right now. We don't have a lot of statements from, the police or David himself. We don't really have a guilty verdict or anything that's happened. But so far, lots of rumors and speculation have been opened up all over social media. And again, we have no idea what's true and what's not. But like you said, I mean, there's lots of coincidences here, definitely some connections. And I think it's open for speculation. I know that one thing I saw that really struck me, I think, after kind of reviewing parts of the case on Instagram, when I kind of looked up David's name, is that some sources were claiming that the car was actually stolen from his possession. Again, we don't know if this is true or not. We're just talking some rumors and speculation here. But I mean, technically speaking, you said he was playing a show. You said he was out of town. Do we think something like that could make sense? Would we steal someone else's car and use it for a murder? Sophia, what do you think?
I feel like there's just so many holes in the story, and it's like a lot of people are asking, why did it take so long to discover her body in the first place? She's been missing for over a year.
Yeah.
I think a super underreported part of the case is that Celeste actually had a history of running away. One of her former teachers actually came out and said that she met David through social media and ran away to Hollywood to be with him months before her April 2024 disappearance. And she was 13 years old at the time. The police wound up tracking her and bringing her back to her mom. But I just feel like that really shows the dangers of social media, who you meet, the relationships that you're forming.
Yeah.
And it just makes me wonder, did police not take the case as seriously because she had a history of running away? Did they think that she was eventually just going to come back?
Yeah.
Because her mom knew that she had a boyfriend named David. So shouldn't the police have investigated every relationship that she had at the time of her disappearance? So maybe if her body was discovered earlier, there would have been more evidence pointing towards him. There could have been actual charges brought against him.
That's a good point. And I think something interesting that you mentioned with social media, I know you mentioned it, Kara, we've seen with a lot of cases and even like political cases, people on TikTok try to solve crimes.
This is very true. Crime talk.
Crime
Crime talk.
And I think, sometimes it can be helpful, but sometimes it can hinder
Very
the
hurtful.
investigation. And David did lawyer up, which he has every right to do. So we don't have a lot of statements.
Yeah.
But I think that's something really interesting with crime kind of, in this generation is people try to solve the case with little to no investigative information. And I think this is interesting and something you're really seeing with this case. Personally, before this, I didn't know who David was. I'm not.
I didn't know.
I'm not. But my little cousin, I asked my 13-year-old cousin, and she knew who he was.
That's how we get our information on the show, guys. Outside sources.
I think if you look up his songs, like you've probably heard them before on TikTok. Like I think you if you look him up, you're like, oh, I've seen that guy before, but
recognize the songs.
I didn't know him at all.
Yeah, I didn't recognize him.
Yeah, I think also something interesting is I was watching an interview that he did, and he said he was brought up on the internet. Like when people ask him his hometown, he says the internet, which is
it's interesting.
weird.
It's an interesting answer.
It's a very interesting
It is such an interesting answer. I kind of think it shows that the type of person he is, maybe he doesn't realize some things. He was brought up on social media, a lot of gore, a lot of, I
think that can definitely affect your mental state. And I know, Sophia, we were talking earlier that he did have a history of some mental health issues.
Yeah. So a lot of people on TikTok noticed, they went through his reposts after all of this evidence came out against him. And a lot of his reposts were about mental illness and just a lot of things about mental illness. So some people are saying maybe that was the motive for possibly doing something dishonest.
It's definitely, again, going back to social media and those rumors, that is, again, something that, could have gone wrong, because again, with that speculation of him obviously reposting those videos and kind of having some sort of connection to mental health issues and or awareness, we can possibly assume that unfortunately maybe he was suffering from something, or maybe he just wants to bring awareness to it. But I definitely think that is an interesting kind of could be an interesting key to this case.
And I will say, on top of that, on the kind of flip side, the only reason we have this information is kind of because of social media.
It's because of social media,
because of TikTok, because of Instagram. That is the reason we are kind of being able to discuss this, because so much information from what people have discovered, they've dug into his past, they've found out these little nuances, things he's posted, his music videos. And I think that's the reason we have this information, because no one else has really released anything.
Yeah, something interesting I want to know, the Discord videos that he was doing with Celeste when she was 13, he was 18 years old, they talked about some interesting topics. They brought up Epstein, they brought up, child crimes, child maltreatment.
Interesting.
Pretty interesting topics to be discussing on a Discord. Now,
especially with a 13-year-old, no less.
And there was something how she went missing in these Hello Kitty pajamas, and then he posted on Instagram on a story of him wearing Hello Kitty pajamas, looking distressed. Now, also say he's not guilty. There's been no trial. It's under investigation. So I don't want to sit here with all this evidence and say he's 100% guilty. Who knows? He could have been involved. He denied that he didn't do it, but he never denied that he didn't know her, which it's pretty clear that he knew.
They've very much had a connection in some capacity.
Yeah. I just feel like the age gap itself is just very concerning in and of itself.
Unfortunately, I literally, again, as we said, this really all draws back to social media. I'm glad you mentioned the age gap, because unfortunately that is a big danger with social media.
Definitely.
Even though they clearly knew each other in person, they met up, but that that age gap, it seems like a lot of things seem more acceptable when you're kind of hiding behind a phone screen, when you're kind of sitting behind a computer. And what seemed like a harmless relationship between a 13-year-old and an 18-year-old was unfortunately probably something a little bit worse and very complicated. And I think, with a lot of us kind of being drawn back to TikTok and Instagram, without kind of the almost like the dependence that our generation has on social media, maybe Celeste would have still be alive, if she never met him through these means.
And we don't want to assume that anything was happening behind closed doors. We obviously do not know, but it just did seem from what we've seen and the evidence that we've gathered, it did seem like their relationship could not have maybe been the best, It definitely seemed like there might have been some strain there. So for me personally, I guess we're giving our opinions. I don't want to say for sure,
yes.
But I could see how the situation could have happened. And I think with all the evidence that people have found and that we've seen, I could see the situation kind of pointing in his direction.
Yeah, I definitely think, he was involved in some way, shape, or form. Now, did he do it? We don't know. It'll come out eventually, and maybe we can talk about it again then. But I do think that's an interesting point and something that I feel very passionate about is protecting the lives of children.
Yes.
Especially with social media. You don't know who you're talking to. That's a PSA. You don't know. Especially with someone, I'm sure she kind of looked up to him in a way. He was 18. He was a musician. He was starting a career.
Cool. That's interesting.
Yeah, starting to get famous.
Right. She maybe wanted to fit in. I do think, as a 13-year-old girl, thinking back to when I was 13, if someone approached me that I looked up to, that I loved, and you could see how somebody would maybe, want to hang out with them, but it is very dangerous, and it's something to really raise awareness about.
And something else interesting I just want to add in, flying out the rumors, everything. There also was a rumor that I've seen that she was actually pregnant. And that was a reason that something kind of could have happened there.
Before.
That maybe, because we were also talking about earlier, why would he have done this? What was the reason?
Possible
Especially
motives.
as he's rising in fame, he's becoming bigger, what was his reasoning? Was there a fight? Did something happen? But something that I did see kind of float around was that she was possibly pregnant or something bad happened there.
Yeah.
So
I'm also gonna tie it back to the music video, because I think it's so interesting. There was this clip in the music video where they're putting a body into a car, and she was found in the trunk of a car.
Which a lot of weird coincidences.
There's a lot
that
of
can
symbolism.
be.
And it also scary because his song Romantic Homicide was number 4 on the Billboard rock and alternative song chart.
I saw that as well.
It's a big song. And to think that there's maybe another motive behind writing that song. I mean, it was released on her birthday.
To think people are just listening to that with knowing what's the deep, dark, truth behind it. That's weird.
And it's also interesting because he had a lot of friends. It's you don't know who knows what. And I think that's something about the music industry, and sometimes a lot of things are covered up because of stardom, because of fame. So I do think that's another interesting thing.
Yeah, I think it is what you said, kind of going back to the song, it is, very possible, again, just theorizing, but, something with kind of a guilty conscience, musicians in general, and, we know this, we see it with Taylor Swift and Billie Eilish, they channel parts of their life and their emotions, into their songs. And, hypothetically speaking, if something happened, if he did kill this girl and he really felt so much guilt about it, is it really that unheard of? Is it that crazy to think that maybe his guilt manifested kind of through his psyche and came out into a song?
That's actually a really good point, Kara, that you brought that up, because I feel a lot of artists do that. They write how they feel. They put what they're thinking into their songs.
The title "Romantic Homicide." That's exactly what
title.
Quite literally the situation.
Himself away through his song.
Exactly.
No, I totally agree. Already, that is all the time we have for today, guys. Although we do not currently have any more information, this case raises a lot of questions that will hopefully be answered soon. That's all from the crime panel. Back to you, Lauren.
Thanks, Eva. Sadly, that's all the time we have for today. In the meantime, stay updated with ATD on all of our socials at PSU at the desk, and let us know what you want to see us cover next. I'm Lauren Perry, and we will see you back at the desk next week.